Hello, Tansei. Danielle here. I hope you are doing amazing and feeling amazing. I wanted to pop on and just share some thoughts, share some recent experiences, and just share some teachings that I feel might support others during this time. This is around the topic of belonging. Now, I am coming off of hosting a week long retreat in the woods, a spirit school retreat where 20 of us gathered in the deep woods of British Columbia, and it was a really beautiful experience. This is my fourth time hosting this retreat, first week of June at the same retreat center. We had returning guests who had been to every retreat that I have hosted so far, and this one felt uniquely different in incredibly beautiful ways. And I wanted to start off the retreat talking about belonging and understanding that we have people from all different backgrounds, all different walks of life, all looking for connection, restoration, and, some profound spiritual experiences for themselves. And it's important to go deep in these immersive experiences by letting your guard down and opening yourself up to whatever spirit experiences unfold for the week. And I felt inspired from spirit when I was coming up with a curriculum to start the retreat with threads of belonging. And I could see a loom in my mind. And so I did find a loom at spirit school and I started it and I started weaving it. And it's usually when I'm in these more integrative acts of following my inspiration that all these ideas start to come to mind. And I started thinking about, different times in my life when I felt like I belonged, and they were very, micro moments. I remember moving to Squamish 20 years ago almost now. And I came from Vancouver, which isn't a super large city, but for Canada standards, it is one of our largest cities. And, when I grew up in Vancouver, same neighborhood, up until I was a teenager, returning to that neighborhood in my 20s, more or less. I was always surprised that I never ran into people that I went to elementary school with, that I went to high school with. I never ran into anyone. And when I moved to Squamish, it was the mail lady. Her name was Sue in particular. I would see her everywhere. I would see her at the grocery store. I would see her at my workplace when she delivered our mail. I would see her out at a park or at the farmer's market. And you would give just this knowing acknowledgement and a smile and a bit of a nod. And that's what I found here in Squamish, which has always made me feel welcomed and like I belonged here, to the point where, what brought me here to Squamish, right, ended up in a breakup. And typically I probably would have just returned to the city that I knew as home, but I always felt comfortable here. I always felt at ease here. And a lot of it was the people. You would walk around the streets running into people and just give each other an acknowledgement nod. Hi, like, I know you. I don't know from where. I don't know if it's through the kids, if it's through work, if you've sat with me in mediumship, but there's this recognition. And people here are not shy about acknowledging one another. And often when I travel, I remember going to Malibu for my 40th birthday to go see my best friend. And I would smile and nod at everybody who passed by. That's just what we do here. And people looked at me like I was crazy, but a few people did nod back. But that's something that Squamish had naturally from when I moved here. And it's something that is so subtle that made me feel like I belonged. Same when you walk into a restaurant or a pub or a cafe. If people know you, they're going to wave you over to their table, which is a huge sign of belonging, that you're welcome, that your presence is desired, that you're valued, that you're cherished. And, the truth is that belonging is not a modern longing. This is one of our deepest, most ancestral human needs after food and water, is a community to belong into and be part of and be seen by. And, the belonging is a feeling, it's a regulated state, it's a space where you feel incredibly safe to be yourself, to be your most authentic self. And it's really important to identify throughout your life the different environments you put yourself in, your workplaces, the friendship groups that you have formed. Are you regulated? Do you feel safe even in your most vulnerable moments? And that's really when you know that you're in a space that you belong in. I think of the retreat around this in particular. There's deep, rich shares and a place of no judgment. Even though sharing vulnerably can feel activating, it can feel like it stirs up the nervous system. The environment you feel like you belong in. You can even show up in your most vulnerable moments in a regulated state and space. So as I started coming up with the, content for the retreat for the past many, many months, I started to pay attention even online, even WhatsApp friends. Like, when do I feel my most authentic self? When do I feel like I can safely have no filter and people accept me at my highest and my lowest? And I've been going through a personal season of being low more than high. And it really did weed out some of those places that I was spending my energy, capacity, and time in. And that was one of my big filters was, do I feel like I have to be filtered in this environment? And I really learned to let go, which has been a real sacred lesson for me for this past really 3 years of my life, of learning to let things go, even though you desperately want to hold on to them, because who you were when they came into your life, it was perfect for, but you change, you evolve, and your standards change and evolve, and how you desire to spend your time, energy, effort, and presence changes and evolves. So I believe I know it is Brené Brown who has a quote around, the biggest detriment to belonging is fitting in. And I love that quote. That might be a bit of a paraphrase, but the detriment to belonging is fitting in. And it was in her research in, I think it was Being Brave, where she talked about the opposites. And she's like, the opposite of belonging is not belonging. The opposite of belonging is fitting in. And that was hugely profound for me. And it ends up being one of those filters of my life that I gauge. I'm like, do I feel like I have to try to fit in here and just make conscious choices to choose not to? Not to not fit in, but even just choose not to go. There's lots of things I've had to turn down, for social evening events, because my evening time is very precious to me. It's the time I get with my family, with my kids, with my garden, with my dog. And that's one of my deciding factors is this a space I can fully be myself in? I think back to how I started all my classes going back quite a while. The initiation, we're going to have our 14th round this fall, my mediumship program. And it's got to be since round 4 or 5. I felt inspired to start the classes, having people place their hands on their hearts and just saying, I accept myself exactly as I come today, and breathing that in. And then, making contact with a couple of like the little Zoom boxes. And I do this at the retreat live as well. And I say, make eye contact with a few people and say, I accept you exactly as you come today. And we go through this exercise of self acceptance and acceptance of others. And it almost makes me mad that we live in a day and we live in an age where acceptance is radical, where making others feel like they belong in their most authentic, unfiltered self is a radical act of kindness or love. And it's something that I hope can be deeply normalized. When I started thinking and taking inventory of my life, like, where do I feel like I belong? Where do I feel my most natural? And I have to go to the world of nature. I have never stepped into nature, whether it be on the shores of an ocean, the depths of the woods, the grass of a park, and question, do I belong here? It's like an innate belonging that we have. It's same with the spirit world. I have never been immersed or blended with the spirit world and asked myself, do I belong up here? The spirit world has never made me feel like I had to fit in or I had to change myself. In fact, the spirit world, one of the most powerful things that the spirit world has said to me in recent years is, we love to work with what we have now. Not your highest potential, not your best day. What we have now is more than enough for the spirit world to work through. So I feel for me, I've gone through life never really feeling like I had to fit in. I am somebody who has been in trouble in the past in my different corporate careers around having no filter. I am someone who wears my heart on my sleeve. I don't carry that much shame. I do have shame around certain things, not gonna lie. I'm not shameless, but I'm not preemptive about my shame. I don't not do things because shame might be on the other side. Unfortunately, I don't think things through that hard. I have experienced shame from the things in the past, but for the most part, go into any event, any friend group, and just find a place anyone. I think it's like an art form, connect within a minute. And she was like, "How did you make her laugh? We have been trying to make her smile." And I said, "I don't know. It's just something that I've always been able to do. I've always been able to connect with people, whether they were adults, children, nonverbal, different language. It's just something I've always had. And even when I came into the mediumship space, I didn't feel like I belonged in a lot of the circles or the centers or within certain structures. I'm not trying to be contrarian. I am not a contrarian type of person at all. But I just didn't feel like it was for me. So what did I do? I created my own space. I created my own circle. So it was really through mediumship and kind of stepping out into this kind of lone wolf path as I've called it, where I've always just created what I've needed, which is something I've advised a lot of my clients, students to do too. If it doesn't exist yet, create it. That idea came to you. So I've been really good at creating spaces that I feel like I belong in because I create them. And it is a goal of mine to ensure that others feel that sense of belonging as well, often without me even having to talk about it or say about it. And that's one thing one of the facilitators noticed at the retreat as well. Just this morning, she was reflecting to me. She's like, I come in and you didn't even say anything. You just held space and you opened up the floor. Does anyone want to share anything? And generously, one at a time, people started sharing some of the deepest things that they could possibly share in a group full of strangers. And I said, "Yeah, I don't know how I do that or if I'm intentionally doing that. I just kind of sit there and I don't prompt people, I don't call people out." And people felt safe and they felt like they belonged in this group enough that they could move past that activation. I'm about to share something scary. People might think of me a little bit differently. And because we've created that space of non judgment and full acceptance, people felt really safe to do that. And we can have deeper connections and experiences. So it's never been a really big problem for me. But it was actually last year, I was in the car with somebody and I'd spent a lot of time with them over the summer. And it was really interesting how she reflected it back to me because we were talking about my career and my life and the way that I teach and, how different people are really drawn to me. And we were also connecting on our Indigenous reconnection journey. She is somebody who did get to grow up in her community on one side of her family, but she was reconnecting on the other side of her family. For me personally, I've been on the Indigenous reconnection journey my whole life. I don't remember a time going back to even when I was a kid where I didn't feel curious about it, connected to it, identified as it. I was born with this connection. But as I was sharing about, she was asking me about different things about the culture, and I would continue to say, like, I can't speak on behalf of the culture because I didn't get to grow up in our culture. And I would push it away. And I said, but I have read and I have heard. And, I can proudly say I do scan the world and look at the world and try to solve problems from an Indigenous lens. And that's from all the reading I've been doing in my reconnection work and reading other people's perspectives from that lived experience. So it feels very secondhand for me. And it blew my mind when she said to me, she was like, I think for you, I think what the healing is that you don't feel like you belong. Oh, like it like hit me. Like I was that meme with like all the numbers going above my head and like the geo shapes, like math just kind of like landing. And I have to tell you, that was the first time in my entire life that I was like, "You're right. I don't feel like I belong." Like, it's not that sense of regulation. It's not that sense of, um, I deserve to be here or I should be here. It's always observing from the outside, not wanting to like put a foot wrong, just walking on eggshells, making sure you're not misstepping. And I have misstepped many times. Oh my God. Declaration is this week. I'll be sharing some of my missteps, especially as of the past many recent when it comes to culture and different missteps. I misstep. I've been called in quite a few times. And as I scanned it, like I say, it hit me like a ton of bricks, like a ton of bricks. I was like, she's right. I'm like, this is where my lack of sense of belonging really is, and really where I spend most of my private time is in that reconnection journey. I haven't talked about it very much, like on the podcast or anywhere other than the collective, or if you're in a personal circle with me, the stories tend to come out through that experience. And I had to sit with that. And I had to go through, the ancestry of belonging. And I'm only going to share a little bit about this today because there'll be more coming around this, over the next year. But my reconnection journey to our culture and to my grandmother's traditional territories have been in the way many of us are reconnecting now through books, through the stories that have been captured in Swampy Cree culture. Things weren't written. We didn't have anything written before syllabics. And of course, taking over more of like the European lettering system and coming up with translation for those syllabics. But so much of our stories were orated. And the truth is, when it comes to my family line, my grandmother was taken from her First Nations community at 6 years old, never to return. So I think about that part of my lineage and my ancestry and my culture, and how my grandmother must have suffered as well with this sense of belonging. And I'm not going to get too personal on here, but I did get to see like some of her writing, and I do have some of the things, and I could tell even through some of the things that she says in there, like, do you remember me? Like, I remember you. And it's like the sense of belonging and capturing that, like remembering of each other. And I could feel that longing for our people in deep ways. I even have friends in the community who are very connected to culture, who were born in the community, who speak the language fluently, who share teachings from said culture or community, that also struggle with this sense of belonging. And as I mentioned earlier, I hate that we live in a time where self-acceptance and acceptance of others and making others belong is a radical act. My hope is that this is what shifts within our Great Awakening era. That's what they're saying this time is, this Great Awakening. I believe that this innate belonging collectively needs to be part of that healing. So, to fast forward a little bit as I wrap up these thoughts for you here today, I have been on the reconnection journey for a long time, and I have read the books and stories from our people, everything I could possibly get my hands on. I read Flora Beardy, I've read Catherine Beardy, I've read Louis Bird, all of his books, all of his writings. I've listened to different podcasts that capture different people's connection journeys to like Norway House, which is, its own Cree dialect in my region, but also a community not far from where I am. So I'm very immersed in understanding and connecting to culture because I feel like it helps my lineage heal as well. And it's very fascinating for me. So I just finished my last Louis Bird book a couple weeks ago and before the retreat. And I was asking Spirit, I was like, I want something really inspirational. Like a lot of the stories of the Swampy Cree, because we were, subarctic community, really rough territories. We had to be nomads because it was too cold to stay in one place. You had to follow the food. Many of our people were people of the stars because we slept under a blanket of stars. So the stories that hold us together are here to keep us safe. So I've personally found in my reconnection journey and trying to understand how things were for my ancestors so I can start to heal that lack of sense of belonging and just taking whatever knowledge is accessible to me. I said to the spirit world, I would love some stories that are inspirational. How are we named? What do we name ourselves? What animals live there? I know now from some journeys that I have taken, which I'll talk about later this year, that it blows my mind what can survive up there. And so I place the thought to the spirit world. can you bring me something? Bring me a person, bring me a book, bring me a podcast, bring me something like inspirational, especially like around names and like how we lived. Like how did we live before European housing? Like these little things I want to know about. Did people see each other often? How did we live day to day? Because the Hudson Bay Company colonized that region really early on in the 1700s. So much of the history has been written and captured of the region, but always from the Hudson Bay perspective, never from the indigenous person's perspective. So I put it out to spirit. I found a podcast right away about this guy who was from Norway House and his journey back to his culture and language. And it was really inspirational. I devoured it in 3 hours. And I just had the thought, like maybe download eBay. When was the last time I went on eBay? It was like before America had Lululemon, because that's the only thing I ever used eBay for, was to sell my used Lululemon clothes. Americans loved it, and it was a Vancouver company, so it was really easy for me to get. So I downloaded eBay for the first time in about 10 years, and I just searched Swampy Cree. And it's a very specific region around the Hudson Bay, Swampy Cree territories. And I found a mug and I found a postcard, and then I found a book. And this book I have never come across, and I have been searching high and low for Swampy Cree resources for a long time. And the book is called The Wishing Bone Cycle: Narrative Poems from the Swampy Cree Indians. And I share this because it is the little things like this, the little treasure hunts that guide me to something that is incredibly valuable and nourishing to me, that helps me with this sense of belonging. And the sense of belonging that was broken and fractured, not because of our choice or our decisions, right? It was imposed upon us, this disenfranchisement, this disconnection. And, especially for us that didn't get to grow up in community and culture, like this is how we kind of harness that sense of belonging. And I have to say, spirit really came out for me on this, because this is probably my favorite thing I have found about Swampy Cree. And I wanted to end today by reading you one of the poems, and that's probably what I'll do when I end until the book is done. But what I love about it, and I'm finished the first portion of this book already, and last night I started the second section of the book, part 2. And would it surprise you to know that the entire second part of the poems are all about names and how our people were named, how their names came to them and the stories behind them. And, at the time this came into my life, I was, overcome with ensuring that the people who were traveling from all around Turtle Island, all around North America, to come to the woods to see me, that they received a sense of belonging. And the reciprocal benefit of this, the beautiful cyclic nature of what happened, is at the same time I am, focusing on other people's belongings, spirits taking care of me at the same time. And I reached out to the author last night because he's still alive. And this was one of his first books. And it's, this is about a 50-year-old copy. This is an original print I found on eBay. I cheaped out. I should have gotten the autographed one. But what I love about it is, our people were storytellers. As I say, everything was orated. And the thing I love about Indigenous storytelling is that the purpose of the stories are to be helpful, but also to give you like an understanding, to like make sense of things, which is how come sometimes they can seem fantastical, because they're trying to explain, like, oh, this is how turtle got their shell. Oh, this is how skunk got their stripe. Oh, this is why the seasons change, right? This is why the sun is in the sky. The only thing that I can find that is an absolute mystery to the Swampy Cree people is thunder and lightning. It's the one thing that there is no story for or about. It's a complete mystery to our people. So I wanted to share with you a poem about turtle today, and then I'm going to love you and leave you until the next inspiration comes in. And I hope you have enjoyed, a little bit of the conversation around belonging, and maybe something came up for you around this. And, my invitation for those of you who love service, be mindful of the spaces you belong in and create what doesn't exist for you. But if you need something to do out there that is deeply healing and enriching for humanity, make someone belong. if even for a moment or a minute. Take a look, scan the room. Who's feeling a bit, stuck? Invite them in. See if there's a way that you can bring a sense of belonging out into the world. And let's just trust the ripple effect of that. And then also, before I read the poem, if you're watching this on YouTube with me, I just wanted to share a few pictures of me and my grandma. This is my grandma on Granville Street in Vancouver with my dad. This would have been around 1966, 67. That's on Granville Street. She's beautiful. And then this is me, my grandma, when she was little. And I share this with you because I feel that while I'm healing my sense of belonging within our community and our culture, this is for her as well. So all my healing is also for her, for my children, for my dad, for my brother, and all the ancestors who surround me. Here's your poem about turtle. There was a storm once. That's when I wished myself into a turtle. But I meant on land, the one that carries a hard tent on its back. I didn't want to be floating. I wanted to pull everything inside and dry. And I'm getting sick in the insides. I want to be a turtle eating buds and flowers and berries. I've got to wish things exactly. That's the way it is from now on. And I love this book. And anyone who is Swampy Cree, I hope the search engines do us justice and align us. Please go get this book. I love it. It's brought so much nourishment to my soul. And I wish you all a lovely day ahead. And I hope that no matter where you choose to spend your time after this, you feel regulated, like you belong. And I will see you next time.